Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking a body of source material that really tackles one of the biggest paradoxes of modern life,
Mm,
which is why does achieving success so often feel like this agonizing internal civil war?
right.
We're going deep into the law of gender, looking at these two paired energetic forces that we all carry, and how aligning them is, well, the secret to getting results without just completely burning out.
And that internal tug of war, it's something everyone feels, right? I mean, you know the feeling. You're running full tilt toward a goal,
A promotion, a deadline.
a marathon, yeah, a massive project. And one part of you is just totally energized, driven, you're ticking off the tasks.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another part, and it's often quieter, that feels, I don't know, dry, resistant, or just deeply unsatisfied.
It's that voice in your head, the one praising speed and certainty and all the measurable results, battling this little whisper that says, hey, maybe a slower, more intuitive way might actually get you somewhere better.
Yeah, exactly. Something more durable, more creative, and definitely, more joyful.
And that dissonance, that feeling right there, that's the focal point of this entire body of work. Our sources suggest that the breakthrough you're looking for, whether it's in your work or your health, it's not about finding some new external system
No.
or, God forbid, pushing harder.
Right. It's about bringing coherence to the forces you already have inside you.
So that's our mission for this deep dive.
Yes. We want to help transform that internal contradiction into a genuine, productive conversation. I mean, we need to stop those two inner forces from wrestling each other into the ground
And get them to collaborate.
and get them to collaborate. So we're going to give you a roadmap today. First, we'll define what these energies actually are. Then we'll show you how to spot that misalignment early on, the whisper before the shout.
And finally, the practical stuff. How to actually apply this and align those forces in your daily life, from project management all the way to your physical health.
It's really a shortcut to understanding maybe the most fundamental operational manual for being human.
Okay, I love that. So let's start with the foundation. What are these two essential forces? So our sources introduce these concepts as like an invisible current that we're all swimming in.
Mm-hmm. A hidden tide.
Right. It's this powerful force that's just under the surface of our awareness, but it's shaping our thoughts, our choices.
Our relationships, our careers, I mean, every single day. The second you become aware that this current even exists, you gain so much leverage over your entire life.
And that awareness starts with seeing these two forces for what they are, just two different modalities of human life force.
Yeah, and the author shared a really personal experience with this. She was, by all external measures, incredibly successful, running her own consulting firm, super disciplined, productive.
All the hallmarks of that strong, forward-moving drive.
Exactly. She had totally maximized one side of the equation.
But inside, she felt disconnected. I think she described it as feeling like a house with too many walls and no windows.
That's a powerful image. And it was showing up physically, too. Mechanical decisions, creativity is completely dried up, and these debilitating migraines. That was her body's reaction to this constant, unrelenting forward motion.
She hadn't lost her potential. She just silenced the other complementary tide until its voice was just too faint to even hear.
And this brings us to a really crucial point, one we have to address right up front, especially with the terminology. We're talking about the law of gender.
Right.
And the author is so explicit about this. These energies, they transcend chromosomes, they transcend biology, they transcend social gender identity. This is absolutely vital.
So when we say masculine and feminine, we're not talking about men and women.
Not at all. We're using them in their archetypal sense.
Mhm.
They are complementary, co-creative principles that are inherent in the universe, equally potent, and they exist in absolutely everyone. They're not prescriptive stereotypes. They're descriptive energies.
Okay, but let's address the elephant in the room right there. I mean, if the sources insist this is beyond biology, why not just choose gender-neutral terms like active and receptive or something? That cultural baggage with masculine and feminine is heavy.
It is, and that's an excellent challenge, and the sources speak to this directly. The author chose to retain the terms because they inherently carry this sense of duality, intimacy, and co-creation that purely neutral words like active and passive just don't fully capture.
How so?
Well, we instinctively understand that the masculine principle is, the penetrative force and the feminine is the receptive container. By sticking with these established archetypes, which have historical precedent in systems like yin and yang, or the Hindu concepts of Shiva, which is consciousness and structure, and Shakti, which is energy and flow,
Okay, right.
The material immediately grounds itself in these timeless universal patterns, and actually it forces us to confront our own internal biases about these forces, which at the end of the day is where the real work of integration has to begin.
That makes a lot of sense. It uses terminology that's rich with meaning, even if it is a little complicated. So, for clarity, let's use the author's defined names. Let's call the masculine current the architect.
The architect, I love that. It's the organizing principle. This energy is directional, it moves forward, it defines, it penetrates obstacles, it fixes problems.
It draws straight lines.
It draws straight, logical lines from intention to result. The masculine current prizes clarity, quantifiable results, structure, and dependability. And its ultimate goal isn't just motion, it's a world paved with dependable steps and measurable progress. It's a sturdy, well-engineered bridge.
So if you've ever mapped out a strategic plan or allocated a budget or, hammered out code.
Or even just established a really firm non-negotiable boundary, that's the spark of the architect.
Okay. And the feminine current then is the weaver.
The weaver. It's the generative, expansive force. It's cyclic, like the moon. It's focused on receiving and nourishing. This energy perceives the subtle, it operates on intuition, and it weaves these interconnections between things that seem totally disparate.
So the weaver finds meaning in the spaces between things.
Exactly. It prioritizes emotional texture and holistic well-being. The feminine goal is a garden of emerging possibilities, a fertile space that you can't entirely predict or quantify, but that nourishes everything inside it.
But that's the moment when you sense a pattern in the market before the data actually confirms it.
Or when you let a creative problem just incubate overnight and you wake up and bam, the solution is just fully formed in your mind. That's the weaver.
So the lot of gender, then, is really about the relationship between the two, the necessity of that relationship.
Precisely. This universal principle dictates that any sustainable creation, a business, a relationship, a piece of art, whatever, it requires the harmonious union of the masculine impulse to initiate and the feminine capacity to incubate and sustain.
Right, because if you initiate without incubation, the project just burns out. It's a flash in the pan.
And if you incubate without initiation, the idea just stays a dream forever. It never actually takes tangible form.
So the feminine provides the vision and the fertile ground, and the masculine provides the walls and the schedule that protects that vision.
It's the conversation that matters. The sources really emphasize that we unconsciously obey this law all the time in our moments of coherence.
So like hiring a new employee.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
You use masculine logic to define the role, review the resumes, set up clear interview criteria. But then, in the final choice between two equally qualified candidates, you get a hunch. A sense that one person's energy will just harmonize better with the existing team. That gut feeling, that's the weaver. And it provides the essential data that the architect's spreadsheets completely missed.
And when those two forces contradict each other, that's when we waffle or procrastinate.
Or we make decisions that just feel shaky and unstable later. The law is simple. Integration is durable.
I really appreciate how the sources ground this. I mean, it can feel very abstract, but the treehouse anecdote is just a perfect, tangible illustration of this collaboration.
It truly is. When the author was a child, her father, a classic architect, insisted on surveying the trunk angles, calculating structural loads, and meticulously sketching this blueprint for days before they even touched a piece of wood.
While she, driven by that impatient feminine instinct, just wanted to climb the branches and start hammering.
Right, just embrace the flow. And their afternoons were this classic energy clash. But the turning point came when the father pivoted. Instead of just dictating the plan, he paused his measuring tape and he asked her, "Where does the tree want the platform to rest?"
And she knew immediately.
Immediately. She pointed to a spot where the branches naturally forked into this supportive cradle, a pure feminine sensing of nature's flow. And he didn't discard his tools. He paused, grabbed his pencil, nodded at the intuitive location, and then he applied his masculine precision to calculate the measurements for that exact spot.
That's the moment of integration.
That's it. Feminine instinct meets masculine precision. The result was a structure that was both mathematically stable and just gracefully tucked between the limbs, causing minimal harm to the tree.
The structure was durable because he learned to listen to the wood instead of just trying to conquer it.
Yes, he taught her that dreams become durable when they're harnessed by design. She taught him that design must bow to emergent flow, and that co-creation model, that's the ultimate goal of this entire deep dive.
So the goal is clear. Not eliminating one side, but weaving them into one seamless operational system. But that still leaves the big question. if both are always there, how do we know when they've stopped collaborating and started wrestling?
That is the crucial pivot, moving from definition to diagnosis. Because energetic misalignment, whether it's in you or in your organization, it really starts with a massive explosion.
It creeps in quietly.
So quietly. And it's often missed because we've completely normalized discomfort. I mean, we're convinced that a certain level of low-grade anxiety or busyness or dissatisfaction is just the price of ambition.
So the sources say we have to train ourselves to catch the whisper. That dull sense of emptiness, the perpetual sigh you keep suppressing, the tension that settles right behind your eyes.
Yes, because you have to catch that before the full-blown shout arrives.
Yeah.
And the shout is the chronic stress, the complete burnout, the dissolved partnership, or, the frightening medical diagnosis.
That senior architect we talked about earlier is a good example.
A perfect example.
Yeah.
She felt that dull sense of emptiness for months. And how did she try to fix it? She doubled down on the masculine.
Of course.
She ran longer distances. She took on more projects, adding even more structure to an already rigid life. 6 months later, she erupts in tears during a routine design review. Just can't stop.
That was the shout.
That was the shout. The initial heaviness, that whisper, was her dormant feminine side crying out for space, demanding creative flow and intuitive experimentation. But she just kept building a dam of action until the emotional flood burst right through.
Okay, so let's detail those signs. Let's start with the masculine dominance trap. The source calls it the clenched fist.
The clenched fist. It's the state of chronic overcontrol. The very earliest whisper of masculine dominance is this palpable contraction around anything that resists predictability.
So, traffic jams.
Traffic jams. A colleague raising a nuanced concern that derails your linear plan. A meandering brainstorming session. That's the architect leaving its drafting table and morphing into a militaristic defensive bulldozer.
And your internal dialogue shifts to commands. Deploy resources, neutralize threats, maximize efficiency.
Exactly. You're driven by the fear of losing control, which is the primary fear of the masculine principle when it's untempered by trust.
And the case of Chris, the tech entrepreneur, is a perfect illustration of this overdrive.
Oh, absolutely. Woke at 5 a.m., lived by spreadsheets, and incredibly tracked his partner's menstrual cycle in a spreadsheet because he believed, quote, data improves intimacy. He was brilliant, his company thrived, but his employees felt completely micromanaged, and his partner felt like a KPI, a key performance indicator. He was so over-identified with his capacity to control that he had pathologically exiled receptivity and flow.
But I have to push back a bit here. I mean, for a lot of people, that kind of hyper-discipline and structure, that clenched fist, is exactly what the market demands for success, right? Especially in high-stakes fields like finance or tech. Isn't there a risk of pulling back too far and losing your competitive edge?
That is a crucial distinction, and the sources clarify this. The risk isn't pulling back on structure. It's pulling back on rigidity.
Okay.
True, high-performing masculine energy is focused and disciplined, but imbalanced masculine energy is brittle. It lacks peripheral vision. The moment Chris started tracking his partner's cycle as data, he stopped seeing her as a human being and started seeing her as a variable to be controlled.
And his success plateaued.
It plateaued because his rigidity prevented him from sensing the subtle shifts in the market and in his team's morale, the very feminine data he needed to sustain his growth.
So when this accelerates to a shout, we get chronic burnout. The nervous system literally forgets how to downshift.
Absolutely. Physically, this masculine overload shows up as classic stress symptoms. Tension headaches, migraines, high blood pressure, chronic digestive issues, and the physical hallmark of jaw clenching.
And emotional.
Emotionally, it's constant irritability, impatience with anything nonlinear, cynicism about anything emotional, and this sort of emotional numbness that the person mistakes for calm competence.
So the medicine then must be surrender, receptivity, trust all the gifts of the feminine.
And that surrender terrifies the overactive masculine because it feels like giving up safety. Recognizing those early tremors, the tight throat, the joyless success, the inability to rest, that is the only way to spare yourself the eventual structural collapse.
Okay, now let's flip it. The opposite extreme. The feminine flood, or as the source puts it, water without riverbanks.
Yes. If the masculine is the clenched fist, the feminine excess is this uncontained swirl. The source gives the example of Serena, a brilliant photographer. She described her life as a beautiful, creative swirl.
Which sounds kind of nice at first.
Right. Ideas just poured out of her. She was deeply intuitive, but deadlines were mythical. Time felt slippery. She'd turn off her alarms because the tone irritated her creative flow.
I can relate to that a little bit. But when impulse drives every single choice, Commitment starts to feel suffocating. Plans become cages.
And unchecked, the feminine flood leads to serious overwhelm because the world requires containers. The shouts here are crippling indecision, a total inability to enforce boundaries, project paralysis, chronic anxiety, mood volatility.
And crucially, it often shows up as financial chaos.
Yes, unopened bills piling up because dealing with numbers feels oppressive, missed deadlines leading to penalties, debt mounting because there's no container to safeguard resources.
Physically, what does that look like?
Physically, this imbalance can show up as lethargy, extreme hormonal swings, chronic fatigue, or these mysterious aches and pains. The system is just drowning in unfiltered receptivity. It's absorbing everyone else's energy, and it lacks the masculine armor of structure to contain its own flow.
So the remedy here is the steady, clear, masculine hand.
Exactly. Serena needed a schedule that protected her creative cycles, not one that choked them. She needed a budget that defined her resources, not one that restricted her freedom. The structure serves the flow. It gives the water riverbanks so it can actually get somewhere.
And we see this play out on the organizational scale, too. The tech startup case study was a perfect example of this.
Oh yes, the founder who embodied unrelenting masculine horsepower. He coded through the night, he enforced these intense weekly sprints, and revenues spiked dramatically. But the high speed created so much internal friction that turnover just soared.
And the products themselves, driven purely by speed, started missing subtle user experience cues. They were logically sound, but emotionally clumsy.
Yes, the company hit a plateau it just couldn't muscle its way past.
So the outside consultant, our source, was called in to fix the metrics. But the actual intervention was entirely feminine.
It was. They instituted listening sessions. They asked each department head not for metrics, but to share how the product felt to them and how their personal experience of the work process was impacting quality.
That must have been pretty unorthodox in that hyper-masculine culture.
Very. And the answers were hesitant at first, but they were rich with this intuitive data. A designer felt embarrassed by the latest release. The head of sales sensed customer confusion that no dashboard was capturing.
The soft stuff.
It was initially dismissed as the soft stuff, but it was the most critical data they had about the human cost of that relentless drive.
So what was the practical remedy? How do you integrate that feminine perspective without sacrificing speed entirely?
The founder had to shift policies to systematically include feminine processes. This meant mandatory weekly reflection phases. It meant encouraging engineers to demo features to non-tech, persona-based friends for emotional feedback before code freeze.
And policies for required downtime.
Yes, require downtime. The company found its second wind because masculine speed married feminine empathy. The soft stuff became their competitive advantage. It dramatically reduced turnover and increased user stickiness.
So, initiation plus incubation equals durable, sustainable growth.
That's the formula.
That shift from rigidity to flow brings us perfectly into the application phase, and we need to challenge what the sources call the seesaw myth. This idea that true balance is a static state where you can only gain one energy by losing the other.
It's such a common misconception. Balance is not a frozen snapshot. It is a dynamic waltz. Equilibrium is a sensation, a feeling of being both crisp and spacious.
Alert, but without tension.
Yes, productive but with genuine ease. The seesaw myth breeds guilt. If you lean into action, you feel guilty that you're neglecting your intuition.
Then vice versa.
But the waltz, it demands seamless, rhythmic movement, where the emphasis passes naturally from one partner to the other, creating equilibrium through motion itself.
And this applies even in the most high-stakes, fast-paced environments. I'm thinking of that emergency room doctor, Naomi.
Yes, she believed she had to suppress her feminine intuition, her empathy, her sensitivity, just to survive the chaos. She tried to function purely as a machine.
But her career turning point came when she realized the fastest way to triage was actually to use her empathy.
Exactly. To quickly assess the patient's fear level and their relational context, while her precise masculine medical training executed the plan. She wasn't slowing down. She was making better use of all of her internal data.
Her capacity to sense subtle shifts in a patient's breathing, which is a feminine trait, coupled with her ability to immediately structure an action plan.
Saved lives. Precisely because both energies were flowing at the same time.
So to help everyone listening transition from these big concepts to these micro moments, let's introduce the practical tool the sources recommend. The micro dance practice or the double breath check-in.
This is such a powerful instant clarity practice for moment-to-moment recalibration. It's all about intentional sequencing.
Okay, walk us through it.
You take the first intentional breath, breathing deeply and expansively, and you summon the weaver. The question you ask internally is, what am I sensing? What is true here right now?
So it's open-ended, feeling-oriented, just receiving information.
Just receiving. And then, on the second breath, you invoke the architect.
And the question is,
What specific action is required now? That's task-oriented, it's focused, and it drives toward a concrete next step. 2 breaths, 2 partners, 1 continuous flow.
and because you always have your breath, you always have access to the dance floor.
Always. It allows you to sense reality before you structure a response to it.
Now, if we zoom out again to the organizational scale, we see this same dynamic playing out in what the sources call the corporate pendulum.
Oh yes, organizations swing so wildly between the feminine startup ethos and the masculine maturity stage.
Right. A startup is often born in a highly feminine state. It's pure idea flow, trust in hunches, maximum adaptability.
The mantra is move fast and break things. But as revenue comes in and the company scales, the demand for structure, dependable revenue streams, and scalable systems, the masculine principle kicks in hard.
Processes get codified, hierarchy emerges to contain the flow.
And the organizational challenge is that if leadership can't keep a vigorous strand of that feminine adaptability alive within the masculine structure, the nimble innovator turns into a bureaucratic, rigid tanker ship that just cannot pivot when the market changes.
So success requires keeping both alive, knowing that the structure only exists to serve the creative potential.
This integration is beautifully illustrated when the sources talk about integrated work in our daily activities, starting with the simplest unit, the meeting.
The meeting.
In a meeting, the masculine energy has to set the agenda, allocate the time, ensure focus on clear outcomes. That's the structural container.
But the feminine energy's job is to read the room, to sense the unspoken tension. Is the team actually on board, or are they just nodding silently out of fear?
Yes. The feminine adjusts the conversation flow. It pauses the relentless agenda to allow nuance or concern or some innovative left-field idea to actually surface. Without the masculine container, the meeting just meanders forever.
But without the feminine presence, decisions are made on faulty, incomplete data.
And when we look at the full project cycle, the yin-yang way, it's not a checklist. It's a detailed relay race between the two energies, each handed the baton at just the right moment.
So talk us through that cycle.
Okay, so conception is purely feminine possibility. You're gathering voices, letting new patterns incubate, imagining the widest potential scope. Then, planning is masculine.
Milestones, resources, risk assessment, mapping the timeline.
All of it. Then execution demands rhythmic oscillation. You push hard on deliverables, masculine action, and then you pause for dedicated feedback loops and reflection.
Feminine listening.
Feminine listening. Revise and push again.
And that critical reflection phase at the end is the one that so often gets skipped in the rush to the next thing.
It's the most vital feminine step. Post-launch reflection is about returning to listening, reabsorbing market responses, learning from failure, and asking, how did that actually feel? This is what allows the next cycle to be fertile rather than just a repeat of the last structure.
The medical device company case study in the sources just hammered this home. They were stalled in pure masculine analysis paralysis.
Total gridlock. The engineering teams were rooted in pure logic reams of technical requirements, but no emotional narrative to excite investors or users.
And the marketing teams, steeped in feminine storytelling, were just waiting for perfect, complete specs before they could even begin.
So both were waiting for the other side to fix the problem. The solution was an integrated agenda that alternated between hard data reviews and these imaginative exercises. They made engineers do persona-based storytelling. They made marketers spend time in technical deep dives.
They forced the two sides to dance.
They did. And that fusion of technical structure and creative narrative stoked fresh momentum. The masculine provided the reliable specifications. The feminine provided the emotional why. Within 6 weeks, they produced a functional prototype and a pitch deck that was emotionally resonant.
Which resulted in a successful raise of $7 million.
Yes, they moved from debilitating analysis paralysis to funding simply by marrying structure with flow.
That blend of analytical structure and emotional storytelling is precisely what makes balanced action so magnetic and durable.
So if the last section was about movement, this section is about the moment of highest leverage, the moment of choice.
The decision.
Decision-making is the vital stitch between our inner vision and our outer reality. And when our energies are unaligned, decisions feel agonizing. We're either too fast, driven only by logic, and we miss something crucial, or we're paralyzed by endless, uncontained possibilities.
This is where we need to consciously recognize and use the concept of the two advisors that are sitting at the negotiation table inside your own mind.
It's a great way to picture it. On one side, you have the masculine strategist. Alert eyes, charts unfurled, demanding data. This advisor asks, what are the defined parameters? What resources are available? What are the measurable risks?
This advisor loves blueprints, spreadsheets, predictable timelines.
Loves them. And the feminine intuitive is the second advisor. Relaxed posture, palms resting on the tabletop. This advisor asks, what does this choice feel like in my body? What are the unspoken emotional or ethical ripples of this path?
This one loves the subtle texture, the unseen connections.
And both are profoundly wise, but neither is sufficient on its own.
Crucially, the sources emphasize that feminine guidance often whispers through the body, which is why we have to rely on the somatic compass.
Yes. This is where tightness or expansion or even a feeling of nausea become essential physical data points. And this isn't magical thinking.
Right, this is not magic, it's neurobiology. When we talk about a gut feeling, we're literally talking about the enteric nervous system, the second brain in our gut.
Exactly. It's communicating rapidly with our cognitive centers through the vagus nerve, which is this massive communication cable running from the brainstem right down to the abdomen.
So our body is logging all this data microexpressions, subtle vocal tones, memories of past successes and failures, long before it reaches our conscious linguistic thought.
The vagus nerve is essentially transmitting this incredibly complex, holistic data set. That feeling of tightness in your belly during a negotiation, for instance, isn't just random fear. It's often the vagus nerve signaling pattern match. The scenario mirrors a past loss. The key is knowing how to translate that physical data into actionable intelligence.
But how do you know it's not just, indigestion? How do you separate a real gut feeling from just having a bad lunch?
That's the million-dollar question. And the answer is practice. It's about building a relationship with your body's signals over time. You start by noticing. When you feel that tightness, you don't just ignore it. You pause, you do the double breath check-in, and you ask, what is this feeling connected to? Over time, you learn to distinguish the signal from the noise. You learn the specific signature of your intuition.
And we can see the enormous stakes of ignoring this process in that high-stakes example of the CEO, Daniel, who is considering a massive merger.
On paper, the masculine data looked impeccable. Metrics were flawless. Analysts predicted a share price jump.
Logic dictated an immediate yes.
But Daniel's feminine signal was this relentless internal tension,
Right.
restless sleep, and this consistent low-level pulling feeling in his gut. At first, he just dismissed it as stress from the workload.
As most of us would.
But when he finally honored that physical cue, the somatic compass, he took the time to trace the feeling back to its root. And he realized the feeling mirrored his regret over a previous unethical partnership he had rushed into years before.
So that integration was the critical step. He honored the feeling, but he didn't just kill the deal based on a vibe.
No, he commissioned a cultural audit, a masculine action that was initiated by a feminine warning. And that audit uncovered huge red flags in the competitors' labor practices and supply chain liabilities that the high-level financial board had completely overlooked.
He sidestepped a major reputational and financial disaster.
The source is clear. Honoring that feminine insight saved the company millions. The lesson is that intuition and feeling are a necessary part of due diligence. They're as measurable and important as an environmental impact study or a quarterly financial report.
So if we put this all into a teachable structure, what does the balanced decision sequence look like? How do we make sure we use both advisors?
It's definitely cyclical, not linear.
Right.
First, the masculine defines the decision space. What is the scope of this decision, and by when does it need to be made? That provides the necessary container. Second, the feminine explores the possibilities. You allow yourself to feel into the contradictions, you research alternatives, you gather emotional data from your team.
That's the crucial input stage. What's next?
Next, the masculine returns to structure the options. It weighs the scenarios, assigns probabilities, runs the risk analyses, and it identifies, say, the 3 clearest paths forward.
And
Finally, the feminine validates the path with body resonance. You step into each of those 3 structured options in your mind's eye, and you feel which one lands with a sense of internal, undeniable coherence. That felt sense of yes or no that bypasses the arguing mind.
So you don't just feel your way to a decision, you structure your way to validating a feeling. You make sure the head and the gut are on the same page.
That's integration in action.
Okay, let's shift focus now to the most personal ledger we keep. Our health. The sources remind us that the body isn't detached from our inner life. It's more like a reliable stenographer.
hmm The body performs the script, our inner energies right. If the script is balanced, the performance is a symphony. If it's imbalanced, the performance is noisy and chaotic.
We have to understand the profound biological cost of chronic energetic imbalance. Let's start with masculine overdrive and health. This is the ceaseless, forward-moving doing that our culture just constantly applauds.
And we get that vivid example of Tyler, the founder, who embodied this overdrive. His body, perpetually fueled by adrenaline and the belief that rest was weakness, pushed so hard that he suffered exhaustion-induced syncope. He fainted.
His body literally staged a coup to force a surrender.
That's what it was, and the biological mechanism is clear. Continuous masculine activation means your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, is permanently engaged. This pumps excessive stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline through your system 247.
Which erodes immunity, causes inflammation.
It severely disrupts your endocrine and reproductive systems. And it manifests physically as chronic insomnia, tension migraines, high blood pressure, and adrenal fatigue. The system is designed for short sprints, not a marathon of constant emergency.
And then there's the other side, feminine overwhelm and health.
When the feminine is uncontained, the system is just drowning in unfiltered receptivity. The boundary issues we talked about earlier, they become physiological issues.
So you're literally absorbing everyone else's moods and stresses.
They're unspoken emotional residue, yes. And this causes the immune system to become either chronically fatigued or over-responsive. It can result in immune flares, fatigue syndromes, and chronic depression that stems from this emotional absorption.
And the body always starts with whispers. A tight hip, shallow breathing, persistent lower back pain.
If we ignore those, it escalates to alarms. Ulcers, panic attacks, cardiac events. The body is always signaling the state of our internal coherence.
So the solution isn't some radical, high-effort overhaul. That would just feed the masculine drive for efficiency.
Exactly. The solution is the consistent implementation of subtle rituals that weave the energies back together.
Okay, let's get into the specifics, starting with micro-transitions.
After each intense work session, a heavy, masculine cognitive effort, you have to institute a 30-second ceremony to close that loop and signal safety to your system.
Okay, what does that look like?
You stand up, you roll your shoulders to release tension, you let out a genuinely audible sigh, and you place a hand on your belly for 3 slow, deep breaths.
And why is that specific sequence so effective?
Because the sigh and the hand on the belly directly engage the vagus nerve and signal the shift from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. The audible exhale physically discharges built-up stress hormones. This brief ceremony tells your nervous system the threat is neutralized. You can release the tension now.
It prevents the previous task's adrenaline from contaminating your next activity or your evening.
It does. And we also need movement integration. The body craves both types of motion.
Masculine and feminine.
Yes. The masculine movement is structured training. Sets, reps, weights, tracking progress, achieving quantifiable physical goals. The feminine movement is fluidity. Improvisational dance, slow yoga, tai chi, movement for pure expressive joy.
And combining them accelerates strength gains while dramatically increasing flexibility and reducing chronic structural pain.
It embodies the warrior poet archetype. Muscles that are capable of holding the line, but joints that are supple enough to navigate complexity and dance gracefully.
Finally, we have to talk about sleep. The sources describe it as the ultimate feminine surrender.
It's the single greatest act of letting go of control. It's where the masculine mind, the planner, the watcher, the worrier, finally relinquishes its duties. The quality of your sleep depends entirely on the intention you set before it.
So we have to prepare a sacred womb for rest.
I love that phrase. Dim lights, soft, receptive activities like reading a physical book or a gentle breath work. Anything to signal to the body that it's safe to be fully receptive.
And what's happening on a neurological level during that surrender?
That's when the glymphatic system performs its nighttime duty. It clears out all the neural debris, toxic proteins, and it consolidates the day's memories and lessons. When you retire in this balanced state of closure, your mind is literally cleaned and your future pursuits are fertilized.
But when you try to muscle your way into sleep,
You prevent this essential feminine function from happening, and you ensure you wake up exhausted and cognitively impaired.
we've saved maybe the biggest obstacle for last, cultural conditioning.
This is the subtle, pervasive policing of which energies we are allowed to display, and it often forces us to suppress half of ourselves just to fit into some perceived social or professional norm.
We are conditioned from childhood about what a leader looks like, what success feels like, what emotions are appropriate. We saw that example of the man who avoided a career in early childhood education because of stereotypes of women rocking infants. He was afraid he would look soft.
And conversely, the woman who felt profound guilt just buying flowers for her own office because it seemed silly or frivolous amidst her serious legal work.
Conditioning tells boys to suppress vulnerability and girls to avoid assertive, directional conflict.
And when those outside expectations conflict with our inner movement, we create a split self.
And the cost of that conformity is just staggering.
It is. It leads to chronic stress from constantly fighting our own nature. It attracts toxic relational mirrors because we're only projecting half of who we are. And most importantly, it severely limits our leadership potential.
A leader who can only use the architect's logic will never inspire true devotion.
And a leader who only uses the weaver's empathy will never provide the necessary structure for growth. We end up bringing only half of our power to the most crucial decision tables in our lives.
So how do we begin the path to liberation from these entrenched, often unconscious beliefs?
It begins with three deeply interwoven threads. The first is compassionate witnessing. You have to approach your past self-adaptations, the coping mechanisms, like hiding your tears in the bathroom or declining a promotion to avoid public speaking without judgment.
You have to thank that past self for protecting you.
Exactly. You recognize that those strategies, though they might be limiting you now, were once necessary for your survival in that environment. And that stops the internal self-criticism loop.
Okay, what's the second thread?
The second is somatic release, because conditioning is stored not just in our memory, but physically in our nervous system. If you learn that speaking up invites criticism, your shoulders might be tense perpetually.
So we use targeted tools like breath work or shaking or movement to discharge that physical residue.
Right. For example, if you feel anxiety when you're just thinking about asking for a raise, you might use 10 minutes of intense shaking or breath work beforehand. This floods your system with a safe sense of physical action, it discharges the stored fear from your shoulders and your chest, and it makes the new, assertive behavior feel safe to your body, not just to your mind.
And the third thread is practiced experimentation, the laboratory of integration.
Yes. You have to rehearse new behaviors in low-stakes environments to rewire your belief systems. If you fear expressing warmth in a masculine-dominated environment, you practice expressing sincere interest warmly to a waiter or a retail clerk.
If you fear saying no, you practice turning down a single non-essential assignment.
And each successful, low-stakes rehearsal provides undeniable empirical evidence to the logical architect that the new integrated behavior is both safe and effective.
And the final threshold we're seeking is the integrated self, the dissolution of the checklist entirely.
Integration is not something you achieve and then maintain through constant vigilance. It's a state of unified being. You experience one seamless current, and you effortlessly express clarity or tenderness or focus or fluidity as it's needed. You stop debating which energy to use, and you simply act from the deepest, most coherent truth available to you in that moment.
We have that powerful final example of the senior executive who learned this the hard way.
Yes. She silenced her feminine intuition during a massive merger decision and suffered the consequences when the deal collapsed. The next time her weaver felt the discrepancy, she didn't dismiss it.
She walked into the boardroom and said what?
She led with, "I have a concern I can't yet quantify, but I would like to investigate this specific area." She married her intuitive insight with a request for specific masculine action, the audit.
She chose to be seen in her entirety, trusting the totality of her intelligence, the structured and the sensitive.
And that decision saved the company millions and solidified her leadership. She stopped being two halves fighting and became one coherent force. And that coherence is what commands respect and delivers results.
So we've covered the blueprints for the architect and the weaver, we've introduced the skills for the dynamic waltz, and we've given you the tools to read your body and your balance sheet for signs of imbalance.
And remember this final vital insight. Integration is not a passive luxury. It's not a demanding checklist. It is the active presence of your undivided selfhood. When you live from that integrated core, you stop pushing against the world because your internal forces are finally aligned.
Success stops being a chaotic finish line you have to fight for and becomes, instead, an echo of your inner harmony. The world responds to coherence like iron filings to a magnet. Go let the world hear the sound of your integrated self.